Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. How's your week been?
It's been good, man. It's been good. It's nice weather here. I feel like I'm saying that every week now, but it's Minnesota in the summer, so
What
can't
what
can't
temperature
complain.
is it over there?
It might be in the 90, might be close to 90 today. We're supposed to have like a heat advisory this weekend, but maybe it's in the 80s today. But I know this weekend's going to be in the 90s. So
Oh wow, you gonna be playing some more golf?
yes, yeah, I'm actually might be playing some golf with some logistics people again this weekend, so it'll be
Oh,
fun.
that's good. Well, good for you.
Well,
So man, episode 14. I'm excited about this one.
yeah, it should be really fun. I mean, it's a hot topic. Our brokerage has used Highway for a couple of years. I know you're interested to kind of learn about Highway, possibly for your brokerage, and a lot of hot topics, and it should be fun. Before we get started, kind of run down the sponsors here. We really appreciate all of them. Taft's did a panel actually with Highway over at the Broker Carrier Summit that I heard really went well. We really appreciate having Tafts on, their premier factoring company. I don't know why we can't see it right now. I think Will's got to do something with our background, but they're open till 12 o'clock. During the week, great communication. Great people over there. Also, shout out to Trio doing all of our back end. Hit them up for nearshoring. HD Ships, where I work. Black Box, Will's company. And then I don't know if you want to touch on Sales Dash.
Yeah, I'll touch on Sales Dash. Before I get into that, we will have an announcement regarding Trio. They're going to donate something for kind of a giveaway, but just keep an eye on the pages for that announcement, the details to follow. But then Sales Dash is another sponsor. That's it's a broker centric CRM. Black Box uses it. We actually made the shift about a month ago, and we did our quarterly reviews, and pretty much anybody that's involved in sales had great feedback, and so we're really pumped to start using it and see what we're able to do with it. So yeah, great company. If you're interested, reach out on their page, or Josh Lyles, that's the founder. Tell them that the dog sent you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, Josh is a great guy. Well, should we bring or did you get the background fixed by chance before we bring Michael in, or should we just?
No, we need to get something from Renz for the background, so we need to proceed as is. Before we bring Michael on, Michael is the Chief Commercial Officer of Highway. He can tell you, we'll get him in. He'll be able to talk about Highway in more detail, but essentially they're dedicated to fighting fraud, right? It's a carrier vetting platform. Michael's got a pretty deep background with tech and freight, so we're excited to have him on as a guest. And yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and get into it. Matt, if you're ready, I'll add Michael to the stage.
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it. It'll be fun.
Cool.
Hey, Michael. Happy Friday. How's it going?
It's going well, guys. How are you? Excited to be here with you.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. We have a lot of people that are excited to listen to this as well, and we're happy to have you. I guess we kind of start. You want to kind of give us. We kind of ask everyone this, but you want to kind of give us your background of how you got into logistics and some of kind of your brief history before you got to Highway.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in college and engaged and needed a job. That's the amazing story of how I got into logistics, right? In all seriousness, that's exactly how it happened. I was in school, and I had a bunch of friends that had interned places, and they were going to go get MBAs, and they had all. And I was like, well, I need to go to work. Like I need a job. I'm graduating, and I was looking for a sales job. That's what I always wanted to do, was sell. And this company, Bear Transportation in Dallas, called me out of my university's resume book and started explaining to me what they do. And guys, I didn't get it. I just thought you just call somebody and they come pick your stuff up. Like I had no concept of the fragmentation and full truckload. And no concept. So they called me and explained the commission structure to me. And I was like, well, I'll try anything for a year. Mm-hmm. And here I sit 20 years later.
So that's how it usually goes. You kind of stumble into it, and then you're kind of in it forever. But yeah, you've got an impressive resume with a whole bunch of different experience. I mean, I'm looking through it now. Executive Vice President of Freightways. Man, I love their stuff. Love keeping up with Craig Fuller, especially on Twitter. A lot of stuff I put on LinkedIn is actually just quotations Craig Fuller. I mean, he's got great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a fun stint. I mean, the majority of my background has really been in operating companies. So after I left Bear, I took some time off, and actually that was the first time I took like a little mini retirement, took a little sabbatical, and then went to work for Redwood Logistics and opened some regional offices for them. And then I wanted to learn a little bit more about technology. So I ran a custom app dev shop in Dallas for a friend of mine between Redwood and Riverside. Just because I really wanted to get a better understanding of how technology was built. So I went to run the business side of that company, and it was just the way that I've always learned is like, just go do something and make enough mistakes and get around enough people and figure it out. I like to learn in a really compressed fashion. And the best way to do that is to throw yourself into something where you just have to do it. You have to learn. So that was that. And then I moved to Chattanooga and ran a business here for almost 3 years. And then, in transportation, before all this non-compete stuff, anti-non-compete stuff got real popular, we had to wait those out, right? Especially if there's things tied to it. Mm-hmm. And so my technology things were like gap years, right? I was transitioning between freight brokers and I needed to honor my commitments. But to say all that, if it weren't for the company in Dallas, and if it weren't for FreightWaves, I don't think I would be as effective as I am at helping brokers at Highway. So that's kind of my story. Mostly, being an operator, building brokerages with just enough technology experience to be a little bit dangerous.
No, that's really cool. And there's one thing you said that I really liked, talking about, how do I find out something? You just got to go do it and make mistakes, man. At least for me, for a long time, I always kind of thought some people maybe just had a leg up, or how do they figure out these things? And I finally just decided, hey, you got to go seek it out, find out it, and utilizing that time from the non-compete. That's really smart. It's kind of cool to see how it all comes to fruition, and then makes you a more complete asset for Highway. So it's very cool.
How did you get to Highway? Was I know it was during COVID. Was kind of your story that kind of drew you to Highway, or how did that materialize?
No, that's a great question, man. So I have done a little bit of advisory and consulting for 7 or 8 years, and even when I was at operating companies, so Josh Lyles, I know Josh. I looked at Sales Dash. My partner looked at it. We refer him to places, looked at that company. Kestrel Insights is a company that, if you're familiar with their geofencing solution, I did some work with them before they went to market. And so I was actually at a brokerage, Matt, when I found out what Jordan was doing. And I'd been working, there's only a couple other vendors in the space, and I've worked with both of them. And I'd worked with one off and on for years, and was just not happy. And some things had changed. And I was like, man, something's wrong. This idea that I have to have a 16-page PowerPoint to train people how to look at 3 different solutions. And yet I'm paying all of this money to an onboarding provider that I really get a packet and an insurance certificate. And I got to employ all these people, and it didn't sit right. And when Jordan showed me what he was doing, I was like, man, this is it. This is the deal. And I was still running a broker, so I was just helping him. I was just introducing him to all my CEO buddies, and was like, man, you got to go look at this. This is amazing. And then I exited that business. And it was just consulting, and Jordan and I became friends, and he asked me to come do this. And so it was really just birthed out of I believed in what he was doing, and I got to know him, and I got to know the team, and I was trying to help him out a little bit. And then a few months later, I decided to do it full time.
Oh, definitely. And it's kind of a unique title, and maybe it's more in tech, but what are kind of your main responsibilities as, chief commercial? I like that title. It's just not one you see very often in logistics. What's kind of your day to day?
So essentially, if it touches growth, kind of external focused growth strategy or customers, I have responsibility for that. So from marketing to sales, to partnerships, to implementation and customer success, I get the privilege of helping to build those teams and lead those efforts. So when Jordan started Highway, and when we as a team kind of decided what we wanted to produce to the market, the experience of a customer was really important to us. Our responsiveness, the consistency of what we say to what we deliver. And so essentially we decided we needed one role to make sure that was a really consistent experience for freight brokers. So that's kind of what I do, Matt. So one of the things we say is that if we ever say something in marketing that our customers don't experience, like we failed. Like anything we say in the marketplace needs to be because a customer has already said that to us. We've already delivered that value, as opposed to something that's aspirational. If that makes sense, right? Because that you guys have been in this for a while. You've been sold stuff, and then you get it, and you're like, this isn't anything. This isn't what you sold me. This is like half of what you promised me it would do. And as a broker, like I never wanted to put my name on something that was half baked. And so that's what I get to do.
Yeah.
Has that helped Highway kind of, in the growth, having those, testimonials, or, being brokers, being a broker yourself, I would imagine, it's kind of helped the process.
Yeah.
So I'm sure everyone, especially, in the kind of a market is like now, they're kind of hesitant to, spend money, but Highways, had pretty good growth despite, the market conditions.
Yeah. So Matt, I think there's a couple of things that contribute to that. One, we come from kind of two places fundamentally. There's several of us in the business that have been really successful freight brokerage operators, and I'll tell you who those folks are. And then Jordan, he started Triumph Pay. So like the foundation of like what started the business was Jordan had freight brokers calling him and asking for payment reversals. If you guys have ever factored or been involved in that, like a factor looks at payment reversals as a key metric to go, why? Like we have to pay this. And I don't know all the legal stuff the way Jordan does, but there's a letter of assignment and you got to do certain things, and you can't just like not pay things. And it was all of this suspicion of double brokering that was happening after the fact. And so in finance, like Will and Matt, when you and I do something, there's this kind of KYC process, this identity check that we go through before we can, we have to go through it before we can log into Netflix when we travel, right? Mm-hmm. But our bank or whatever. And in brokerage, it was like, hey man, like, yeah, sure. Give me an insurance cert and sign this packet. And, if nobody wrote anything bad about you on Yelp, I guess we'll give it a go. And so what Jordan said was, no, this is an identity problem. So you have that aspect. And then you got me, Michael Grace, who was at NTG, a guy named Mike Hamill, who built the brokerage at US Express and was, Alex, I ran 2 fleets. Mike Hamill worked at US Express, large motor carrier, built their freight brokerage. Will Vandekamp worked at US Express and was a technology leader there. Let's see who else. Matt Furnish was at C.H. Robinson for years on the carrier side. And so, what we're not is a bunch of technology guys telling brokers that we know more than them. Yeah. Because that's really frustrating.
Yeah, I love that. There are some maybe tech companies getting into the freight space without any actual freight experience. And then it's just kind of a disconnect, right? So it's always refreshing to have. It sounds like your team's just full of people with, immense experience. So, yeah, I'm sure that works well, especially when you're talking to these companies and able to understand things and just have a product that makes sense and works.
Yeah, ultimately you want to understand the user, right? Like what does the freight broker need? What does the compliance person need? What does the CEO need? And then also like what does the driver need? What does the owner operator need? There's a question in the comments like, has anybody ever worked on the carrier side? Yeah. When I was at Port City, I ran a small fleet that was all owner operators. I had 100 guys running dray business. And so I know how painful it is for an owner operator to ride the market cycles. I also know how painful it is for a carrier to have to go through really inconsistent checks based on arbitrary data. Yeah. Right? They only have a certain amount of time in a day. And when an onboarding experience for a legitimate carrier takes a half hour, it's a really painful experience. So we also think a lot about the driver too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I know we had touched on this a little bit, pre-show, and maybe you want to kind of give a brief background to people who don't know how Highway works. But I think that's one of the things you had talked about was inspections and what is kind of being determined of whether a carrier is going to kind of commit fraud, and some of the things it's very common today with the inspection aspect. Often sometimes hurts small carriers. You can probably sum it up better than what I was just saying. But.
Yeah. So think about it first of all. Let's pivot away from logistics for a second, and let's just think about the way that all of us talking and viewing this podcast experience the world. And when we're evaluated for something, a job, our credit history, anytime someone's making an evaluation to determine fitness to perform a duty, they're looking at a lot of things, right? And so let's just go through the job thing. Unless you have a felony, right? That's just like, no, you can't work here if you're a convicted felon. They're going to look at a lot of things. So maybe you've moved around a lot, but maybe that's because you've worked at startups and the average tenure of a sales leader at a startup is 18 months, right? Like, and so job hopping is not bad, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when we look at carriers, what we don't do is say, well, you only have one truck, so you're bad. You don't have any inspections, so you're bad. What we say is there's several data points that is very important to establish three things. Who's the unique user? So if Will Hopkins comes to Highway and tries to access, who is he? Where's he been? Is he really Will? What is who's the fleet? What's the makeup of that fleet? And are they capable to do the thing that they're representing they can do for the broker? And often, guys, you don't know. And so a lack of inspections doesn't mean bad. It just means you don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
It just means that truck hasn't. Look, man, I ran a dray fleet. We tried to not be inspected. Okay. You ever seen a dray truck? You buy really old trucks that you duct tape together. Sorry for all my friends that run dray fleets, but that's what you do. Yeah. You don't want those trucks inspected, right? You want to run them around town. It's crazy. The average miles on those trucks are 35,000 miles a year because they're running in and out of the port, right? You do as little as possible to keep those trucks roadworthy. Mm-hmm. That's just the truth. Sorry for all my friends that I'm outing. And so the inspections is a singular data point that should just tell you what other questions you should ask.
I like that. Make sense? Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think that's something people get caught up on now. The inspections. It's okay, no inspections. It's just no book.
And what if they're a pre-pass carrier? There are services that you can pay for where you can skip the inspection site.
Yeah, I've got a customer who bought a truck and he's trying to run it over the road. He called me one day. He's like, "Man, nobody will work with me because I don't have an inspection. I can't get one." I didn't know what to tell him. I didn't have any real good advice. I just told him, "Well, we can load you." We ended up giving him loads and working something out. We kept the truck moving, but yeah, man, he just called people authority time. Nothing. He just didn't have the inspection, so he just get hung up on.
Yeah, and so we want to provide a way for a small carrier to heal that ill. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can come and there's things you can do in Highway to show a broker where your trucks are and prove you're legitimate. And so that leads to, I think what you were asking about, Matt, is this idea of friction, which is what we were talking about yesterday when we caught up. Fraud lives in friction. It lives in friction and urgency. Mm. So, we all worked in brokerages. And if you think about when a lot of fraud happens, it's Thursday and Friday afternoons because you're kind of going into the weekend and there's hot loads at the end of the day and you're trying to get them covered. And so, bad actors know that, right? They know that if I can flood the phone at an urgent time of day on a longer length of haul, I can talk somebody into giving me that load or giving me that load information. When you react and say, "Oh my gosh, fraud is bad," or "we had claims," and I'm just going to produce friction across the board. Well, now nothing is consistent because it's really hard for the rep to keep track of the checklist, and the bad actor is they're gaming that piece. So what do you want to do, right? If a carrier is a good carrier, I'm not talking about size of fleet or someone's opinion of their service. They have insurance. They operate in the light. They're not doing shady things. They're not double brokering your freight. They don't have 7 MCs at one address and they're moving stuff around and they're moving trucks around, right? You want that carrier to go really fast. And so that carrier that I just described has a 30-second onboarding experience. Because it feels very similar when you sign in with Google and there's already a session open and we know who you are. If you're not bouncing your IP address around, we know what fraud looks like. If you're not bad, you're going to have a really fast experience. Yeah. If there's a flag that we see in our tech, we're going to slow you down.
That was a cool part for me to see because when I was a broker, we didn't use Highway, and the company I recruit for now, we've been using Highway for 3 years, and we do all of our onboarding through Highway, and it's very quick. We don't, the brokers can do it themselves. So I think that's kind of one unique, maybe it's out there, but it seems kind of unique to Highway in that sense where it's kind of do onboarding with it as well.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's important to the carrier as well as the broker. A lot of times it'll be time sensitive, and you might not have the time to spend an hour or 2 hours on a setup. You got a question here from Alex Bates. When a broker makes a report on a carrier within Highway, is it fully anonymous or is the broker's info attached to it?
We know who it is.
Okay.
But again, when we look at reports, we're not looking at what I would call Yelp reviews. The guy was late. He kicked my dog, whatever. You misused a trailer, like you stole an asset.
Hopefully didn't take a dog.
You double brokered a load. You held something hostage, right? You did something fraudulent. Like it's our reports are very black and white. You did or you didn't.
Yeah, that's great because, man, so 411, you get on 411 and sometimes you'll read a freight guard and it's just like, man, like you just have nothing to do all day. Like this freight regard is ridiculous. It's like, oh, driver's like 20 minutes late. Man, I don't know. So that's cool that you kind of have it pretty black and white.
Oh, deleted those, Will. Like you have to pick in Highway. Like you have to pick. And so somebody will pick like what they say, double broke or trailer misuse or something. And what it really was is the guy was late, ended up delivering it. And just, there was a difference of opinion of what the carrier did. And they shoehorned it into one, and we ended up deleting it. We were like, guys, come on. Like there's other places you can go post this. That's not what Highway is. Because in Highway, you can configure rules around those reports.
Yeah, when I was dispatching, we had the insurance company was on like the West Coast, and it took a while to get it. It took like an extra hour, and the guy ended up filing a freight guard because the insurance company didn't send it quick enough. It's just a whole thing, man. Some of the freight guards are ridiculous.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, you want to call me? I'll get into all this with you. I'm not going to get into our how our reports work live on a podcast.
I think I'm glad you brought that up too. It's kind of a good segue to kind of what we were talking about earlier, which I think is really unique of Highway. You guys kind of, keep some things, in-house about kind of, the new methods of fraud and what's going on. As I was telling you pre-show, I was listening to your episode on, Freight Caviar, and you were like, yeah, the bad guys are listening to this, trying to figure out, ways to get around it. And that's kind of a hot topic because you see a lot of people posting, new methods of fraud on social media every week. There's events on new methods of fraud. I mean, kind of what are your thoughts on that and kind of, Highway's approach? Because I think it's kind of a unique perspective that, makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So there's a couple things. One is, bad actors are always looking to game your system. They're looking for how, like I could write the script. I can tell you what they're going to say on the phone. Right. Oh, buddy, that's my dad. And I dispatch for him. And he's a good, like, why do you have 3 MC numbers? Like, how did you log in from Indianapolis, Indiana and Serbia? Like, how did the same user log in from 2 different countries in 3 hours? How'd they do that? Right. Like they're not going to go on and on and on. Right. Yeah. And so here's part of what happens. If you go tell everybody how to fix it, they'll just find ways to hide better. And the system needs to entrap the bad actors so that you can build algorithms to get adaptive and predictive on like where fraud may be coming from next. Right. That's part of the kind of the magic of the technology. Yeah. Right? The second thing is we want to educate carriers and say, look, man, like I do this I go to conferences, I go where carriers are, and they'll come and Highway is saying bad things about me. And Highway didn't say anything. All Highway did was log what you're doing. And so sometimes I'll sit guys down and say, look at how you run your business. You might be the best guy in the world, but I don't know you. But your activity looks like the last 5 guys that stole freight. Like when you're trying to run 5 companies and say that they're one company, all from Eastern Europe, I'm not saying that that's an illegitimate practice, fellas, but I'm saying a lot of companies that do that steal freight.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So it's just like, look, if you want to be seen differently, behave differently. And the companies that get a lot of freight from brokers, this is what it looks like. And so we walk them through that process.
So what would you say is the biggest differentiator between you and some of the other companies in the same space? I mean, it kind of seems like maybe you touched on a few, but like if you had to just kind of give like a pitch deck of some of the biggest things that separate you from, say, like Carrier Sure, like My Carrier Packets, or any of these other vetting solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple things. One, there's other companies that I would say that they do what they were founded to do. So when you say, I don't want to have a paper packet, I need you to produce an onboarding packet, there are other companies that do that and they do it very well. If you say, hey, I need to go get an insurance certificate and I don't want to do that and I need you to monitor it, they will go get that insurance certificate and monitor it for you. What I would say is different is when companies try to pivot to something that isn't their core, it's really hard. There's technical issues. There's just intellectual property issues. And so like onboarding and insurance monitoring isn't broken. The difference is like onboarding is a feature of what we do.
Yeah.
So for a motor carrier that's been through highway a few times, the onboarding piece is it feels like when you download an app from the app store and you agree to things. Mm-hmm. Like the carrier, we know who they are, they pass the class, they go right to the broker carrier agreement, they go right to the financial information, and they're onboarded with the broker in 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's nice.
The hard part is the rest of our tech stack is built on fraud protection and improving productivity for the freight broker. Mm-hmm. So the core differentiators, we're looking at all different vectors and saying, hey, what are all the vectors at the inbox? What are all the vectors in the sign-in process? And what are all the vectors at the load level? So one of the things that we do that no one does is we provide load level compliance to tell a freight broker if that carrier is actually in compliance to be able to haul a specific load at a point in time.
That's huge. We've had some issues where it slipped through the crack and they're not insured for a certain type of commodity, and then there's a claim, and then it's a complete loss.
No, because if you think about it, onboarding has typically been pass fail, right? Like I'm pass or I don't pass. Yeah. And then insurance is like, I do have insurance or I don't have insurance. And you could do some rules and TMSs around insurance limits, 100,000, 250,000, but that's kind of it. TMSs weren't built to handle like what we call classifications. They weren't built to handle business rule complexity. So what we do for freight brokers is say, I mean, you can let this broker in and they can haul all your Niagara water freight, or they can haul, your recycled Pratt garbage that's going to their box plant. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I'm gonna give you that Samsung load out of Southern California. Right. So those are two completely different things. Highway takes care of that. Like highway takes care of choosing which loads a carrier can and cannot book for a broker.
So are you doing that just by the value, or can you do it by as detailed as, say, if it's like precious metals, like copper, like they're not insured for copper, but the limits cover the value. Are you able to get that intricate?
Yeah, we just know the rule, right? So let's say that's you, right? And you wanted a classification highway called copper or high value, right? Or whatever. You get to build the rule. And we'll tell you whether or not that carrier passes that specific rule set. So you can say, hey, yes, good for this, but not bad for that. In the past, what you would have to do for a special customer, be it a type of appointment or commodity, you had to train the rep what to go look for.
Yeah.
Hey, the carrier's in the system, but hey, here's this Word doc that we're going to print out and pin in your cube. And I ran FedEx. So anytime you book a FedEx load, you got to go through these 17 bullet points.
Yeah.
Well, now we automate that. It's just automated.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's actually really interesting. Because seafood was my big thing I was hauling, and a lot of carriers, they would tell me that their insurance, doesn't cover seafood, and I, move on. But I was kind of always wondering like what our kind of back end process was, if they just lied to me about having, seafood, because I'm not, we had compliance departments looking up, that type of thing. And I didn't know that highway had that ability to do those rules.
So we have a question from Bill, and it kind of seems to be in line with kind of what I was getting at. But Bill says, does highway look at exclusions on all policies? So, and I don't want to speak for Bill, but I guess where my mind goes, when you're looking at the policy, does the broker need to create the actual rule, or is highway kind of doing that as it receives it to automate, like, hey, A, B, C, D, E, they can haul, or is that too much? Is it
no, I know it's a great question. Bill's a sharp guy. I know who Bill is. Man, the problem with exclusions is that the actual insurance carrier, the market, doesn't publish them electronically, and and they might change. And they might change between renewals, right? The carrier may be trying to save money. And so exclusions are really hard. You can build rules around producers and underwriters. Like if you know certain underwriters have claim issues, like you can make certain business decisions. And then what we do, if for certain classifications to try to give brokers extra protection, is by class, by freight class, you can ask that question very specifically.
So I saw on your website that your integrations are, I don't know if you're like McLeod, it says that you guys are partnered or at least have integration. So if I were a McLeod user, which Birmingham company, actually it's where Black Box is, Birmingham.
Yeah. Are you in Birmingham? That's where my wife's from. So her best friend lives in Chelsea. So I spend a lot of time in Birmingham.
Yeah. The Magic City. Next time you're in Birmingham, shoot me a message. But
yeah.
So say if I'm a McLeod user, if I have a like customer profile built out with some exclusions, would Highway be able to integrate with that to kind of like, would that go over, or would I need to do it separately in Highway?
No, actually McLeod is the one TMS that did build that in their V2 integration. So there's certain things we can pass to McLeod that we can't pass to other TMSs because McLeod did build that. We went to market with them with a very basic integration, and then they were really great to build additional things to be able to take data that only Highway has. But what you have to do, you have to survey the carrier.
Yeah.
But we give you the ability to survey, let the carrier sign into Highway, and you can ask them like, is ice cream an exclusion for you?
Yeah.
And so you have that data. So it's carrier provided, and Bill probably knows this. Like it's just you can't. The insurance companies don't give that to you. They don't give it to you in a structured format.
No, that makes sense. I mean, that's kind of, I'm good on that subject. I think that you did a really good job answering all the questions I had. I feel like
thanks, man. It's hard.
How does the integration aspect work? Was that a challenging, because this is probably a dumb question for my tech friends out there, but is that like a big challenge when you have a new tech, there's so many different TMS companies out there, new ones coming up, every day, and you probably, I guess, have different prospects that work with different TMS or their own TMS, kind of how challenging is that to integrate, or I guess maybe kind of talk a little bit about the integrations or partnerships with Highway.
Yeah, so integrations is always an interesting topic because integration can mean a lot of different things. Are you just writing something to a system? Is that system required to write back to you? And so a lot of times when freight tech companies come to market, they'll come to market with this value prop that relies on 72 things all working perfectly with read and write back. And it's like, yeah, good luck with that. So what we tried to do is we tried to go to a market really simple. And what we wanted to do was show the TMS providers a ton of value. Right. And so what happens is freight tech companies come to market and then they start beating down McLeod's door and TMW's door and Turbo's door, saying that they have to be integrated. Well, every TMS company has a backlog of integrations that are a mile long, right? And six customers that want the integration. So what we try to do is we try to build a lot of mutual value, where customers were going to the TMS providers going, you have to do this for me. My stuff's being stolen. I don't care about this whatever integration. Like I need this one. So we try to build a lot of marketplace value, and then the TMS providers actually wanted to do it because it makes them stickier with their customers. They get better data from us. Like we do some factor cleanup. We put better data back into their system than some of the other providers. And so what we try to do is create a win-win, Matt. Now, from a tech perspective, yeah, it's hard because you're often marrying new tech with old tech and that's been around for a long time. And sometimes the mapping around some of that, I'm not very technical, but it's not easy. It takes a while and things break. But once you get it dialed in, it's pretty good.
It sounds like you guys kind of, had a real thoughtful plan. Because, you guys have grown really quickly, but even just to thinking of that aspect of having, a simple integration and, showing value to that. I guess what would you kind of attribute, some of, I think it's kind of hard for anyone to deny Highway's, had rapid growth in a, short period of time. There's a couple things to summarize, why you think that happened, or I don't know if that's I'm asking the question the right way, but I think it's kind of ways.
Like if you follow technology, they'll talk about product market fit, and go to market, and there's all these like SaaS,
buzzwords.
things that people use, and really like product market fit is like, does your stuff work and do people want to use it? And so the first thing is like, we built things that worked. Like before we went to market, we had 2 brokers like live doing all of their onboarding before we went to market with the full Connect product, right? So we built it for brokers by brokers. Like we didn't raise a bunch of venture capital money on the West Coast and try to reinvent the wheel. We just tried to improve what was already being done, and we took really basic cybersecurity principles and just brought them to this. Like we didn't invent anything. We just contextualized it to freight brokers. So I would say that's one thing, right? We built something that worked. And the second thing is like we have kind of like 3 operating mantras. One is be responsive. Like if there's anything that's pretty maniacal in highway, it's like email response time, customer response time, be really responsive. And then own your mistakes. Make a mistake, own it, fix it, walk it back, figure it out. And then the third piece is own the outcome. So like if we can own the outcome for a broker, if there's something that we can do rather than telling them, well, if they just do these 7 steps, like we're going to own that outcome. From a responsive standpoint, like if technology companies would just listen to their customers and build what they ask them to build, like they would make more money. And so we're not a group of like product geeks that try to sit around and build things we want. It's just listen to your customers. I tell people this often. Had other technology companies listened, highway wouldn't exist.
Interesting. That's a good point.
How many, I mean, this might be tough to answer. Do you kind of have like a ballpark estimate on how many different brokerages you guys are currently working with? So, I mean, I see highway everywhere. So I was telling Matt when we were doing this show, man, I'm interested just, for like my company to learn about, because everywhere I look, I see highway.
I'll tell you. Give me just a second.
Okay, yeah, take your time.
602.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm sure like as that market share grows, we're talking about. So, well, I guess I'll backtrack before I ask this. So when you're saying, okay, the info is already there, so do they need to complete it one time, or are you guys sourcing that elsewhere? Okay, so once they've done.
So think about it like this. Like when you go to you own a home, you go to Zillow, look at your house on Zillow. There's a whole bunch of stuff about your house that you never told Zillow.
Yeah,
never told them, right? And so there's a lot of things about a motor carrier that can be derived publicly and from other data sets that you can produce a profile on a carrier, the same way you can produce a profile on an address in Zillow. And so what you do is you produce that profile and you don't expose it, and you challenge the carrier to come prove that they're who they are. The same way that if you went to Zillow, Will, and you're like, this is my house, Zillow would ask you to prove that you are who you are and that you own that house to be able to control some of the information about that home. The same way that like Google does with a restaurant, right? Google's profiled every restaurant out there. You go claim it and you say, this is my restaurant, I want to manage it. The concept is the same. So once a carrier does that, that's about a 4 to 7 minute process, depending on what the carrier has to go through. After that, it feels very much like a social sign-in, like signing in with your Apple ID or your Amazon account or your Google account. That's the experience we want to produce for the carrier.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I really like that comparison where you compare it to Zillow. That made a lot more sense to me. I mean, I kind of understood it before, but that was a good way to put it. I can kind of visualize it.
Yep.
That's exciting. So how long has, and I know this is readily available online, how long has Highway been, when was it founded?
I think it's like 2.5 years at this point. I think it's, I think something, right? Something like that. It's something like that. It feels like it's been a lot longer, but I think it's been about 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's a lot of growth in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously you've touched on it, right? All of you guys have extensive background. You've been in the industry, but I mean, as it kind of seemed like fraud jumped up, and maybe 2.5, 4 years ago, did you guys kind of see that and say, hey, we should do something to address this? Or was it due to the rise in fraud? I mean, I put on my post today, Truck Stop posted something in 2023. They estimated between 500 and 700 million in fraud a year. Was that kind of what drove you guys to it, or was it just kind of like always thought about it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, I would say like Jordan didn't have the context of what Truck Stop or anybody else was doing specifically. Again, he was looking at it from the payments perspective and seeing it as a pretty basic security problem that no one was addressing. And so we knew that there was more than fraud. We knew that there was double brokering issues because of all the payment reversals. And then you saw fraud getting really, really bad toward the trail end of COVID. And when you couldn't legitimately double broker anymore because freight was $4 a mile, they just started stealing it. And then you started seeing strategic cargo theft as opposed to straight cargo theft. Go find something Scott Cornell recorded. He's better at explaining that than me. And then, yeah, there were some ownership changes among other vendors, and it was just a very opportunistic time. We just saw things changing about how some people were doing things, comprised of the change in the business environment, and yeah, a lot of it was timing, man. A lot of it was timing.
So when I think of double brokering, there's two main types, or at least the way I classify them in my head, right? And after I say these, I'm going to ask you maybe if you see any more prevalent. What I see, or at least seems to be the case from my end, theft aside, well, besides stealing the actual cargo, right? What I see most of the time, or at least what I've been exposed to with the double brokers is one, some of them will try to run a semi-sustainable double brokerage where they're actually paying the carrier and they're going to run it as long as they can. And then when the wheels start falling off, they might do a cash grab. And then the second type is they're just never going to pay anybody and they're just running it up in the net 30 and then they're closing doors. What are some, do you disagree? Are there different types that you see a little bit more often?
No, I think you're right. First of all, the majority, the strategy of most asset carriers that are above 100 trucks or so is to overbook their market and double broker the rest. Right? Like when you look at an asset carrier and their need to keep their trucks utilized beyond a certain equipment count, they're overbooking and then picking what they actually want to move, and either just picking stuff up later or running it through their brokerage. I mean, it became so prevalent. I saw the article saved from 2004 where I don't know if it was Overdrive or Transport Topics did an article on all these asset carriers starting freight brokerages. That's when US Express started one, and so when they were actually legitimizing that practice. So second, I would say, yeah, there are carriers that are great, really good at double brokering. They run 4 trucks and they run them local and they use that authority to get into people's networks and they go double broker that freight.
Yeah. So when I think about it, I mean, like obviously there's apparent double brokering schemes, scams, and then it's like, I mean, some of it, I don't want to say it's obvious, but some of it is obvious and some of it's like a little bit more advanced, but it's still, when it comes out, it makes sense, right? But then I always wonder, man, there's got to be some guys in just like Central Kentucky that like you just have no idea. And they're just making a killing and nobody has any idea, like running.
Well, now we know because we can understand with our data partnerships, we can understand if they're billing for more trucks than they have. Yeah. Like
oh, that's a good point.
The carriers
I like those, they call it capacity moves.
Yeah, there you go, Bill. Yeah. I mean, or like, oh, it's so there used to be, I call it the wink, like it's my owner op.
Yeah, he's leased on.
But it's leased on. Okay, right. Well, you have a scheduled auto policy with 5 trucks on it. So which one is it, right? So you asked about difference. Like we do VIN level intelligence, we do movement level intelligence. And again, I'll go back to this. There are some people that are legitimately good at double brokering. They may have a really good niche. And so now what we say is like, hey, you just need to paper that. We can facilitate that co-broker agreement.
Yeah.
But the actual broker just needs to know. There needs to be some certain indemnification. We need to make sure you have the right insurance, and you just need to have a co-brokering agreement if you choose to do that, and if the shipper's okay with it. Like it's a practice. But don't say you're a dispatch service and go be a broker. Yeah. Don't represent yourself as being a carrier and double broker freight, because especially with fraud, right? Like if that double broker, they're getting the freight stolen from them.
Yeah.
Right. Well, because they're not operating a broker the way we would think about operating a broker with all of the systems that an actual broker has.
Yeah. So as far as if you're onboarding a dual authority MC, brokerage and carrier, what does that look like? Are there any like flags that they go off? Because I mean, when I was still, sometimes even like if a carrier calls with brokerage authority and like, not just Landstar, which Landstar a lot of times it's just like,
they're easy to pick on, Will.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Beyond Landstar, like there's I don't know, like Tennessee Steel Haulers, they have dual authority MC. We booked a few loads with them. They have brokerage. So does, there's quite a few, right? So when you're onboarding them, is that taken into consideration? Do you alert the broker? Because some people just might not know. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of those where that doesn't mean, okay, so we go back to like good, bad, neutral.
Yeah.
That's a neutral data point. Right. So here's what I would tell you. If someone has brokerage authority and it's dual, it's going to look different than someone who's running a carrier authority and a broker authority at the same address or near there. Right? And there's not a lot of dual authorities left that are legitimate that are running that. We had one at Riverside. They're old. There's not a lot of them anymore. But it is an alert, and you get to look and make a decision as to what you want to do.
Yeah, I like that.
But it doesn't automatically fail a carrier. Like the broker gets to decide what additional vetting they want to do when that information is present.
I think that's a great way to do it. I don't think it should necessarily be a barrier to book simply because they have dual authority. Because there are many great, like you said, a lot of them are old school. They've been around for a while. There's some great carriers that also do have brokerage authority. There's one in town, which, but yeah, no, that's all very interesting. It's a whole different, I would say it's a whole different world because it's so prevalent, right? But when you really get into it, you can go down the rabbit hole of all these different scams, and you have to, I mean, I hate to say it, there's a lot of money in it. I mean, a lot of these guys, I'm sure, are doing very well.
And it's easy.
There's no recourse, really. So, I mean, like if you, for the most part, if you catch them, it's just like, yeah, I caught you. I'm not going to book my load, but like what's going to happen to you? So it's like, I mean, really and truly, like you had to pick a crime. It's a pretty good one to pick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of what you're seeing, I think, in the way that there's a lot more what I would call blitz thievery, right? They're trying to get 15, 20 loads at the same, because we catch them so fast.
Yeah.
So because of the way that we can kind of spider web what they do, we can catch them pretty quick. So one of the things that's challenge, like we have a whole investigations team that just kind of watches and tries to, we play war games internally. Well, what if they did this? And what if they did that? And kind of trying to hack our own stuff. And, but yeah, for the longest time, like if you go into a bank, right, and you hold them up for $100,000, like the police show up, it's on the news, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
$100,000 load of cargo disappears. Nobody
really.
There's no senator talking about that.
But like the authorities, they don't. It's not the same. That's a great comparison. Yeah, if you show up. We got a question from Christina here, and you kind of touched on this, but what is Highway's greatest value for smaller or growing brokerages, or is Highway more for mid-sized to large brokerages?
No, I love this question. I get it all the time. I would say the greatest value for a small broker is we talk about fraud because it's such a big deal. But one, you're going to find the right truck for the right load. Through some of our capacity tools. So small brokers often have to rely on public load boards and often don't have access to some of the tools the large brokers are. So we've built a really specific small broker product that's really affordable, that gives you very similar solutions to what the largest brokers in the country have. And you also get a really robust sourcing tool. Right. So what small brokers struggle with is like this chicken and egg, like how do I build a carrier base so I can build some kind of repeat movement, and how do I get customers and so you're running down two roads, right?
Yeah, cart before the horse. I get the
and so so what we want to do is help small brokers really focus. Hey, like go focus on a geography, go focus on your core customer, and let us help you identify those carriers that are most likely to move that freight, that already pass your rules, and do good work there.
Oh, definitely. Before we get to Hector's question, I didn't want to forget about this as we're kind of running out of time, but I know we're talking a lot about the present situation and the past situation. Where do I don't hear this talked about a whole lot. I mean, a lot of people say, well, hopefully the government will step in, but where do you see kind of the future? So you're seeing so many companies come onto the freight fraud space. It's being a big topic. Where do you see kind of fraud being at, 5 years from now? Or, is it going to be still going to be this cat and mouse game? Or do you see that there'll be kind of, a merger? There'll be, a couple of companies that kind of just have found a solution and you don't hear about as much? Or where do you kind of see the future of freight fraud in, 3-5 years from now?
No, that's a good question. I think, one of the things that we talk about in freight, and and I think some people talk about it pejoratively, but I think it's also a worthy conversation that freight tends to be a little bit behind kind of the major technology trends. Like there are some people that still think like a great EDI solution is cool. And it's like, really? We're still doing EDI? Like, okay. But I think freight fraud will go the way of fraud in that if we have anything to do with it, it will live in the fringes, right? It will live in the, like who still answers an email about a rich Nigerian prince that wants to give them a lot of money? Like who? But every now and then, right?
Women.
I mean, every time we hire somebody new, like I get a, hey, this is Jordan Kraft. Do you have time to get me gift cards? Like I still get that text, right? And so I know, Matt, it's kind of a simple joke, but it's the same, right? I think there'll be two worlds, right? The highway world and then these other places where guys are trying to steal stuff. I mean, we're evaluating the inbox, the phone system. You have to automate it, right? And so, there's very few networks that live without a firewall. And the ones that do, like, I don't know, man, I don't know why you're doing that, but you're getting what you ask for, right? You're getting what you pay for. So that's the way we think about highway, right? It's a firewall, right? It's a firewall for your freight network. And I think people will either operate inside that firewall or outside of it. And then the other thing I think that will happen is the real focus of highway is eliminating fraud so that we can develop high speed, frictionless connections, right? Digital connection between carriers and brokers, right? Because brokers aren't going away. So I think the other thing that will happen is as fraud diminishes, you'll have more the value of digital connections and the speed at which carriers and brokers can transact will go up. And that will naturally reduce fraud because you won't have as much freight living out in the public just to be taken or gone after.
Yeah. So as far as this is kind of not what we were talking about, but I'm curious. As far as the broker logins, are they geotagged? I mean, so a big thing as of late is offshoring for brokerages. Mm-hmm. If I had a rep in Serbia and a rep in the Philippines and I'm utilizing highway, would they have access to it or would it need to be from our central office IP?
So like, Will, if you were doing that at Black Box, like you'd have to tell us who, where, and we'd have to whitelist it.
Okay, but you would be able to whitelist, and that's something that you guys would do.
Mm-hmm. But there's security around that, right? Like we have, like, look, there's no secret. Like Rapido, Lean, HubTech, like
Trio.
Every broker has a nearshoring solution, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's part of the onboarding and security process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so 401 does geotag, and they won't whitelist. So that's an issue. Also, 401 is just really outdated. It just one of those things, 401. But yeah, so we got a question.
I don't know, man. 411 saved my ass plenty of times in my career, dude.
OG. I mean, it's the OG. Like, it is what it is, right? Like, it hadn't been built out. There's really like it, but yeah, we use 401. But again, it seems like Highway has a superior product. You guys are doing a lot more. And then again, with 401, there's a lot of, we don't need to go into it. We got a question from Hector. He says, what's Highway doing so brokers can onboard carriers from Mexico IP? I'd assume it's the same as what you're describing.
Yeah, we have a solution for that. It's not as automated, right? Because you can't, I mean, they don't have the FMCSA in Mexico. They don't have the DOT. But we onboard Mexican carriers for several large brokers. And then I'm working on something with Cargado, who specifically is developing some like a Mexican exchange. Matt Silver started Forger and sold it to Arrive. So we've got solutions for Mexico and Canada. It doesn't look or feel exactly like our North American solution because it's not possible. But yeah, we do that.
Very cool. Well, man, I feel like we covered a lot of ground. I know I'll just speak for myself. I learned a lot, and it was really good to learn about Highway and what you guys are doing. I think that it's a worthy cause, right? It's a cool thing. It's a business driven with a purpose, right? You guys are doing good things for good people, protecting a lot of people, and obviously the results speak for themselves. I mean, 2.5 years, you're working with all kinds of brokers. Before we wrap up, any final questions from the comments, or Matt, did you have anything that you wanted to touch on, or even Michael, if you had something you wanted to talk about?
I think we hit it all. I mean, or most of it. I really enjoyed the conversation as well. It was really fun. Fun having you on, Michael.
Thanks, man. I think the last thing I would probably hit, Will, is you talk about business with a purpose. Mm-hmm. When you ask about differentiation, I think something else that's different about us our ownership structure, like we don't chase big institutional money, and we don't sell to shippers. Right. So at the end of the day, if you're a freight broker working with highway, like you are our top priority. We're not trying to get your data to go build some product to go up market or do right. Like one of the things that we experience a lot as freight brokers is pay people a lot of money, gave them our data, and they went and built something to go sell to shippers to compete with us.
Yeah. Or
as long as Jordan Graff runs highway, that's not going to happen.
Or even the old TMS, we need this built out, build it out for you, charge you an arm and a leg, and then we roll it out and resell it for just
exactly.
Yeah, it's just like something very basic. It's like sell me this product, just want like a little change, but now it's just $50,000 to do it.
And I think one of the cool things about highway and that network effect is not like, hey, we're going to charge you to do it. Like when we respond to a fraud vector or we listen to our customers, while technically every freight broker that is a highway customer is a competitor, none of those 600 freight brokers wants fraud to be a problem. And so the network effect of the way that our group of customers wants to help each other, they don't want to help each other be more competitive, but they all, there is an agreement. Like the more that we contribute and do things the right way, the more fraud we drive out and the more we help the small carrier, because fraud hurts the small carrier too.
Yeah.
And so what is really cool is when you build a culture like that around a product that does have a very specific focus. That's how we've won so quickly. A lot of it has to do with not just our internal culture, but our customer culture too.
Yeah, that's a pretty moving statement, just with freight and logistics as a whole, especially when the market's down. There's just a lot of discourse. It's brokers are angry, drivers are angry, shippers are, everybody's pointing the finger at it. This is one of the very few topics or things where everybody's on the same page, and it's really cool. Everybody can work together. It's not zero sum, right? You preventing fraud in turn might prevent fraud from my company. So no, I mean that was a really powerful, moving statement.
And look, we're not perfect, man. Like we get some stuff wrong, but we want to try to fix it really quickly. Carriers aren't perfect, brokers aren't perfect, but the core of what we do, if you really think about it, is the reestablishment of trust. The reestablishment of brokers have low trust for software providers right now, just given the 5 to 7 year history of freight tech. So if we can reestablish trust with brokers, if we can help brokers and carriers reestablish trust with each other, a lot of what we do is it's very basic. Like how can we, and it doesn't mean that we're perfect all the time. Doesn't mean the highway's perfect, but it does mean that we provide the ability for people to fix their mistakes and do better. And it sounds simple, but it works.
Yeah. I mean, some of the best solutions are simple. And I think that, I don't know, that mindset or method really will prove, I'm sure that customers will be loyal to highway with some of the other tech providers. Just like I described, a little change that would make sense for everybody, and you charge arm and leg, resell it, and it doesn't. Yeah. I'm not very loyal to you at that point. It's like I'm looking for other providers. So
you come up with this thing and you see it in a press release. Look what we did. And you're like, didn't I write you a $50,000 check for development hours on that? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
It's a bad taste, man.
It's crazy.
Brought that up though. I was curious. Are you guys building a platform? We were just talking about shippers. Are you guys building a platform? I think maybe I was reading something else wrong. This was a while back, but building a platform for carriers to vet brokers that are committing fraud.
Less about a platform, but we do want to have a free carrier product where a carrier can do a broker check and just know, hey, they're legitimate, they're not legitimate. We think it's important that if a carrier gives transparency, they get some transparency. And so that should be coming very soon. We've been working on it for about 9 months, but it's free to carriers.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thanks again for spending your Friday with us. You've been a fantastic guest. And again, I've learned a lot. It's really been a pleasure to learn more about your background in highway as a whole. It's very exciting thing that you guys are doing. So yeah, more power to you guys. We'll definitely be rooting for you. We'll have to do it again at some point.
Let's do it, man. Good talking to you guys. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Michael.
Enjoy Friday.
Thanks.
All right.
That was fun.
Yeah, man, that was a great one. I learned a lot. And again, it's just one of those topics that it's always around. You're always hearing about fraud one way or another.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like I was telling you before. I mean, all the agents I talk to, one of the common questions is, do you guys use highway? You know, a lot of their previous companies are using Highway. You know, everyone seems to love Highway, and I didn't have exposure to it as a broker, so it's kind of cool, you know, learning about it. And yeah, Michael's obviously a really smart guy. I mean, and just so much knowledge in the industry, and it's fun to talk to him.
Yeah, they've definitely got a powerhouse team. I'm sure that Black Box will be exploring Highway as a solution in the near future.
Well, before we go, it's a good segue to our sponsors, Ryan, over at Taft's. Great show, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, Ryan. If you guys are looking for a factoring company, like we were saying previously, I mean, these guys, and we talk about communication in this industry. And one thing I always like to point out, like I pointed out earlier, I mean, they have someone live answering the phone till midnight during the week. And just a really good people all around, nice Midwest company. If you're looking for a factoring company, just if you have questions about it, you know, reach out to Ryan or Rob, or, you know, some of the guys over at David, some of the guys over at, you know, Taft's.
For sure. Yeah. Great group, great company. We'll put them at the top of the list for any recommendations. Additional shout outs to our other sponsors, HD Shipping Solutions, Matt's company. If you're looking to go the agent route, definitely get in touch with them. They run a great program, and everybody that Matt's onboarded has been happy. It seems like they're doing really well. Sales Dash CRM, Freight Centric CRM. Again, they're a great solution. Black Box is a user. Just did my reviews, and everybody's talking about how much they love it. Josh has a freight background, so it was built out for freight. Good stuff. Trio Inc., nearshoring, great guys. They do our back end stuff, all of our editing, graphics. That's the Trio guys. And then, of course, my company, Black Box Logistics.
Well, have a good weekend. Will, are you hitting the golf course too?
We'll see. I'm sure I'll find my way out there. I've got what they call it, the bug when you start wanting to play. So I'm trying to stay away so I don't get out there too much, but I'm sure I'll find my way out there.
Sounds good. Well, we'll see you guys next week, and yeah, we'll be back next week. Have a good weekend, everyone.
All right.